Hello, welcome back to FM Live. My name is Mike Usrey, and today I'm going to be talking about latch adjustment in general, how and why you should take care of the very important seam between your top and the windshield, also a little bit else around it. So if you have questions about this, or if there's anything that pops up that strikes your fancy that you want to chat about, of course, drop it in the comments. We try to answer those throughout the video as we go along. However, this is going to be mostly a short how-to, and we'll talk about some things to watch out for along the way. So you might have seen, we do have a video out there about the NA and NB latches and how to adjust those, because they also need to have a very precise, well, mostly precise adjustment. So that way you can make sure that your top is closing properly on those cars. They are very similar to each other. So those are already covered in that video. I'm not going to talk about those today. Today, I'm only going to be talking about the NC. We have a power retractable hardtop version behind me, and then also a soft top version over here. And the good news is that the adjustment procedure is exactly the same. They have the same latch, and you're basically doing the same thing for both versions. A little bit different in that one's manually operated versus this one you got to use the buttons, but that's the only difference. So without further ado, let's talk about what tools you need to be able to adjust the soft top. Luckily, it's pretty easy. And this is it. Here in front of me, I have a couple of screwdrivers. You'll notice that this one's got some painter's tape on it. Believe it or not, that is actually factory service, what do they call that? Special service tool. The manual says, wrap a screwdriver with tape. Alternatively, if you have a nice stiff trim removal tool that's kind of got a smaller pointy end like this, it also works as well. I also have a little rule. This one has both metric and imperial on it. More about that in a second. And then also you will need some snap ring pliers. Now these snap ring pliers, I will note that they do need to go pretty small. The snap ring that we are going to be working with is pretty tiny. So if you don't have a pretty small one, this one is a very, special unit. It's about 15 bucks at your local hazard shop. Pretty easy to get a hold of. So that's it. That's all we need to do to make the adjustments. So you don't have to have a big toolbox. But before we actually do the procedure, which is a pretty quick and easy thing, let's talk about why. Why do we need to adjust your top? Why does it need to, be sealing properly, that kind of stuff? That's probably obvious for most reasons, but to state the obvious, it's probably noisy. If you got a loose top, if that gap between the two, the windshield and your top is loose, you're going to get a lot of wind noise that's going to basically hit that gap and want to either come in the cabin or at least be deflected up and off of the top if it's not seated down properly and tightly. You can also get some water intrusion. So if you park your car, you come out the next day after it's rained overnight or something, and you've got wet carpet, maybe wet seats, even a wet steering wheel before, then that might be part of it. And then, of course, just for noise, if you are going down the road and you have a loose top, it's really obnoxious. It's one of the things that drives me bonkers. So I always recommend to make sure that you have a well-adjusted top, NA, NB, and NC in this case. It's pretty simple to do. So now that we've kind of covered those things, let's go ahead and do the procedure, and then I'll talk about a few other additional bits after that. So I'm gonna gather up my tools, and I'll jump around to the passenger side. This also applies to vehicles that are right-hand drive versus left-hand drive, so no worries if you're watching from somewhere else that has the steering wheel on the other side. Turn on my light here, there we go. So, first of all, I have removed the plastic surround. You don't have to do that. I only did it because it makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on. On the soft tops, they do have two little kind of ball end clips that just push into these little retainers here in the header bow. And you just use like a clip, I don't have it over here, but like a trim removal tool to pop them out if you want to do this. Again, not necessary. So you've got this latch assembly, and of course when you take off that cover, your button goes away. So same thing, it's just this little arm over here, pressing that, and that releases the latch, right? Pretty simple. Now, on this one, it actually is really loose. You can probably see in the video how loose this is. Let me actually show you on the top, because it's a little bit more dramatic, just how loose the tops can be if they're not adjusted properly. And if you watch this seam right here in the front, you can see that, especially on this side where I'm pulling, how much movement I've got at the moment. And let me tell you, this is noisy. So the goal here is that we want to bring these two together, right? So the reason why you have a rule is so that way you can actually have a reference for where on your painted surface versus where at the front edge of your top, what is that distance? Factory manual says that that should be between 4 and 8 millimeters, or 0.16 to 0.3, I think, inches. Sorry if I got that quite wrong, but basically that's just telling you how tight it's supposed to be. So that's a reference. Right now, this is like 10, 11 millimeters, something, you know, it's way too big, and that's why you have so much movement. So let's fix it. Back down here under the car. First thing you need to do after opening this up, you'll see that we've got a screw here. There's another one on the other side that you can't see, but same thing. We also have this spring, and it's got a little hook and a bar, and then here's that little snap ring that I was talking about earlier, little bitty guy. First step, just pull down on the spring, and you can just by hand pull it up and off of this little bar. That way you have it out of the way. Afterwards, we're going to take our screwdriver, number 2 Phillips, and take out these little screws. They are fine thread screws, and I will warn you, they usually have some orange thread locking compound on them. So the first time you take them out, it's probably going to fight you. So make sure that you've got a good solid bite on the screw before you start whaling on it. Put these aside. I'm going to get the other one. Okay, just like that. So now we need to worry about that little circlip. Now this is where we use a couple of different tools, potentially. Mazda says use a tape-wrapped flat blade screwdriver, and they want you to put it underneath your circlip and basically gently pry it off. I found that to be kind of tedious. I don't like it. So you can if you'd like. I actually prefer to use, if I'm gonna do it, I use this little trim tool. It's plastic, it's a little easier to see what you're doing. It's not quite so clumsy. But basically they want you to gently pry forward and then walk that around all the way until your circlip is loose and comes off. That is the factory method. What I actually prefer to use is just use the circlip pliers, both off and on. I think the reason why Mazda tells you to use the flat blade screwdriver to begin with is because this circlip, it's made out of metal that bends really, really easily. So if you go too wild with your circlip pliers, you'll probably bend it out of round, and then it won't actually clamp onto this very nicely, and you'll have to try to bend it back into place, or probably just get a replacement, honestly. So if you're going to do it this way to take it off, you just want to be very careful and only apply just as much pressure as you need. And I will use this tool to also give me a little bit of wiggling here at the top. There we go. So again, I was trying to be very careful not to spread this circlip too far. Otherwise, you'll be in for a bad time. But now that that's out, this little pin, you just push it through the other side, set it off to the side. Now, this part, and the reason why Mazda wants you to protect your screwdriver, or basically cover it up, is because this is plastic. This little piece, it basically holds these hooks and this adjustment piece together, but it's plastic, and if you pry against it with a big piece of metal, you'll probably break it. Set that to the side. Now, we have access to our little adjustment that hopefully you can see. This guy, it's just a little eyelet and it is a threaded eyelet. So you can see the threads up here. I can spin it clockwise and it pulls that eyelet further up towards the latch. And when I move it, of course, that's going to mean that it's drawing it closer. So when this hook activates here in this pocket, it's going to draw it closer and tighter. So I'm going to spin this a few times because I know that this was really, really loose. This is going to be a little bit of experimentation with where it actually is going to be perfectly lined up, but spin it a few times. Take your plastic cap, get it back on here, and then take the little dowel pin, push it back in here. Now we don't need to put the clip on here because again, we're just testing right now, but I'm going to then watch and feel as I'm closing the top. I am getting some resistance, and you can see as the top is pulling close, it's actually squishing the rubber gasket a little bit. So that's good. Now, I don't know if this is quite right. So now the next step is measure. So let's go check that again. All right, I can already tell this is much tighter. I can't actually move it back and forth, so we're definitely moving in the right direction. And then if I am to measure this guy from basically the painted surface to the front of the top, I'm right about 5.5 millimeters at the moment. Sorry if you can't see that very well on camera. But basically, now we're actually in the range, because again, that range is 4 to 8 millimeters. Now, this is a little bit of it's a piece of rubber. It's gonna move, it's gonna flex. I wouldn't take that measurement as your only data point for saying, cool, we're all good, PRHT, let's go drive. I would at least experiment a little bit and see, because the other thing is that your only anchoring point is right here. That's the only point where this is getting pulled together. Here at the edges, you are like, it's a big solid structure for a convertible top, but it is gonna flex and move and have a little bit of variance from end to end. So it's always a good idea, take some measurements and see, does it still line up where you want it to be, all the way up and down? And in the most case, this looks like we're right around that 5-6 millimeter measurement for between these two surfaces. So we probably are good to go. I will note that you can't adjust that hook too far up to the point where it's really, really difficult, if not, almost impossible to close. And obviously that's going to be way too much strain between these two pieces. You don't want that. It's also really difficult just to get the latch undone. So you can go too far, watch out for that. If you go too loose, of course, you're going to get it banging around. You're going to get the wind noise. You might get some water. So you're aiming for that kind of baby bear solution where it's just right. So I'm pretty happy with this. Let's go ahead and put that all the parts back together. That way you can see how it's done when we're all wrapped up. Okay, so again, I'm going to open up the latch. And now that we're happy with everything, now we can put our little circlip back on. And again, just a reminder, go easy. You might bend that guy up. Just enough pressure to open it to get it over that little lip. There we go, just like that. So it moves around, but it's not falling out of the groove, so we're all good there. You can pull on the spring, get the spring down over the little post and in the groove there. Use your handy dandy screwdriver and get those little screws back in place. I don't usually bother putting new thread locker compound on these little screws. There's usually enough left over of the orange stuff, and it's kind of a gummy material, so I don't find that it's necessary to reapply any kind of Loctite or anything like that. If you do, you might put like a little dab of blue. I wouldn't do anything more hardcore than just the blue Loctite. All right, so there we go, and that's it. Obviously, again, we'd have the case, like the cover around the outside here, but that's it. We're all adjusted, closes, it's nice and tight. It doesn't move around much. That squeaking that you hear, if you do, is my seat. It's not actually the top here, so this is in good order. Now, let's talk about the cover in and of itself, and I'll actually show you another thing on the power retractable hardtop. And that is that another thing that drives me bonkers, that is a good thing to do while you're doing this, is actually on these pieces, they go this way, it's just plastic. It's really thin plastic. It's pretty flexible. So it's pretty common that these are going to be rattling and making noise all the time. So one of the things that I like to do is put a little bit of insulation around the top where it meets this header bow. On this car, we've gone with just the very simple option of taking some like rubber or silicone hose, and you slit it all the way down, and then you just fit it over the edge, just like that. And same on this side. On soft tops, this header bow stops, so you really only need to protect or I guess cushion the sides. You don't have to go all the way around the whole thing. But once you have that in place, there we go. And line up those little pins. There we go. It will fight you a little bit, but there we go. You can kind of see now that it's in place, this plastic cover won't rattle around against the header bow. So that is good to go. And on this guy, that's pretty much all you need. Let me show you on the power retractable hardtop, because those ones, they're a little bit different here. And we'll talk about the weather stripping, because the seals are another point that can help out with all of this adjustment. So over here on the power retractable, it's the same setup, same kind of latch assembly. You know, it has all the same buttons and the hook that has that same threaded shaft, so that way you can make the adjustments. So I won't do the same procedure on this car, it's already been done. Same. The only difference is that this one, it does have a slightly different shroud, and you might be able to see on this one, because it does go all the way into, you know, back here where there is plastic. I've actually opted to do a slightly different method. There we go. I'm not going to take it all the way off, but you can see I have this same kind of thing, but a very thin weather stripping. I've just applied all the way around the perimeter of this piece, and that keeps it from rattling. The later style covers, they also have these little hooks in the front if you're going to take this piece off. So, sorry, shining the flashlight right in the camera. You have to watch out for these little hooks. So you will break these plastic clips on the front if you're not careful. Kind of show them to you there on the camera. They have to slide down and off, so be careful of these guys. But otherwise, same procedure there. Okay, on weather stripping, basically, wanted to chat about that a little bit, because it is another thing that's important for actually getting that seal and getting everything to be nice and tight without either over cranking that adjustment or basically just being hopelessly out of adjustment. If your weather stripping is in bad shape, if it's torn, if it's ripped, if it's, you know, missing, whatever, obviously you're not going to get a good seal. Another thing that happens over time is that it just gets so sunburnt and weathered, and it gets really porous that it will actually start to harden and become less pliable. You definitely want it to be pliable, and that way it's able to squish and deform and properly make a seal against the top. So one way that you can do that is obviously keep it clean. That's really one of the important things, is make sure that you don't leave a bunch of crud and dust in here. If there is, clean it out. Just some soapy water or maybe a simple green is what I usually like to use when I'm cleaning these guys out. But another thing you can do to take an extra step is actually apply some kind of a, you could call it a seal lubricant, or basically a conditioner. I like this stuff. It's called Shinetsu. It is actually a weather stripping lubricant recommended by Honda. There's lots of different flavors of this stuff out there, but basically It is a silicone and rubber lubricant, and it's kind of looks like a toothpaste really. But you wipe this on there, you let it sit on your weather stripping for a little bit, and then you take a rag and you just wipe the excess off, because you don't want it to actually leave grease whenever it's touching stuff. But what it does is it helps rejuvenate that rubber, so that way it stays nice and pliable for many years to come. If you love your car, show it some love, keep the weather stripping clean. But that's it. That's my whole spiel. Hopefully that was informative. I will stop and see if there are any questions that I didn't answer along the way. Okay, so the question is about, are there adjustments for the power retractable hardtop in the gears? And Travis, you can probably actually see pretty well down in here on either side, but there are definitely gears in there. There are cables, there are screws, there are sensors, there are motors. There's a lot about these that you probably don't really notice until you open up the top and have it halfway open and look around. We aren't going to be covering that adjustment in this video, but there are definitely maintenance things that you need to do. You need to keep the gears clean. You need to keep them lubricated. Sometimes you do need to adjust the tension on the cables. So yeah, there is more here that's pertinent to the power retractable hardtop compared to the soft top. If that is something that is of particular interest to you and you would like to see a video about it, let us know. We won't be talking about it in this video because that's a bit more in-depth, but yes, that is something that if you have a power retractable hardtop, look into it. Actually, there are a few other guides on the internet at the moment that do talk about how to make those adjustments and make sure that everything's moving at the same time and closing up where it needs to be closed and keeping everything in time. So, question about the kind of alignment, if you will, of the top. So NAs and NBs, instead of having one latch in the middle, they have one latch on either side. And that's basically one, how it tightens, but also two, how any kind of adjustment is set. On NCs, there is basically just stubs on the left and right side. They have little receivers, and that's where they live. Is there really any kind of adjustment? Kind of. Let me shine a flashlight here, Travis, after I open up this guy. So, just like NAs and NBs, actually, you can see there's two big old Torx bolts that hold these guys in place. If you loosen these, you can actually move this plate around a little bit. And just like NAs and NBs, what I like to do, if these need adjustment, they typically don't on NCs. You can loosen these guys, close the top, get your adjustment with the claw, you know, the latch actually set where you like it. And once that tab from the top is actually engaging with the striker plate, then you can tighten down these screws, because that should be where it's actually positively engaged and where it's supposed to live. But again, generally, these don't need adjustment. They're usually not going to be moving around. If you've had a top completely removed from the car, like on a soft top, if you've removed the entire frame, swapped it out because it got damaged, you might need to do a little bit of moving around and adjustment, but unless you've done something pretty major, that's usually not necessary on NCs. Hopefully this was something that, if you hadn't done it before, this inspires you to go take care of your top adjustments, so that way this is actually something that you don't have to worry about. Maybe you just got the car and it needs a little bit of love. This is simple stuff to do. You don't usually need to buy any parts with this top design, generally speaking, unless the previous owner has like cracked the plastic on this little hook. You typically don't need to worry about replacing anything. It's usually just setting up the adjustment, tightening it up, getting, you know, your weather stripping reconditioned if need be, that kind of thing. If you have any questions that we didn't talk about in this video, be sure to leave those down in the comments below. Of course, even after the fact, we do answer as many questions as we can about these things. And if you like this kind of stuff, you know, maintenance kind of related stuff, even though maybe some people might say it's pretty easy, there's a lot of people just getting into Miatas and may not know how to do these things. If you like this kind of content, drop us a comment and let us know, so that way we'll do more videos talking about this kind of stuff. And if you have suggestions about other things, of course, let us know. We are always happy to look at those and see what other topics are out there that might be interesting for us to cover, and maybe you'll see in another video in the future. However, for now, I really appreciate your attention. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you learned something. If you did, give us a like, maybe subscribe, so that way you can catch the next video. And until next time, again, my name is Mike Usrey. Thanks. We'll see you then.